Colleagues, we have already formed a quorum. It's the appointed time, and let's call the meeting to order. In the 2012-13 legislative session, as at the last meeting, we have already scrutinized 41 works projects with a total funding amounting to $102,283.4 million, out of which projects under the capital works projects amounted to $98,226.9 million. Today we have a total of 5 discussion papers involving the upgrading of 5 public works projects to Cat A, and the amount of funding being applied for is $3.1624 billion. And if all the projects are approved, then the total number of projects being approved would amount to 46, and the total funding amount would be $154.458 million, involving a total funding of some $101.1893 billion related to works projects. And I'd like to remind members that if they have any direct or indirect pecuniary interests on any discussion items today, then in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, they should declare their interests before they speak on the subject, and they should also disclose the nature of such interests. And I'd also like to draw members' attention to the ruling under Rule 84 of the Rules of Procedure. Item 1 is an upgrading of the project to Cat A, and the amount is $1,244.3 million in money of the day prices, and that's the reconstruction and rehabilitation of Kwai Tsing Container from Tung Kwong Road to Prince Edward Road East Main Works. And members have already indicated their support for the proposal at the meeting held on the 28th of May 2013. That is the development panel meeting. With us today, we have Mr. Choi Wai, and Director of Drainage Services, and Mr. Tai Wai Man, Chief Engineer. Any questions? Ms. Emily Lau. Chairman, I support this paper. I can see on the table we have a paper with us, and that is a highlight of the salient points being discussed at the development panel meeting. And apparently it said that there was some response made by the administration on the points made by members. I don't quite understand it. So why don't you just set out your response in the paper? All right, these are the points made by members, and if you have any response, then why don't you just set it all out here? Why do we have to ask you again? All right, on bracket 3 is about the beautification work of the Nullah. And members were of the view that the administration should do it. But what is going to happen? Are you going to do it or are you not? And does that mean that there will be an increase in the cost, and will more time be needed? And also, I can also see the plan in Annex or Enclosure 2. So apparently, there is a movable pod. What does that mean? All right, it's a fish shelter. What is that? Thank you, Chairman. Well, with regard to beautification, that's already covered in the scope of works in the original paper. In para 9C, there is an ancillary works, and that would already cover ancillary works, including landscaping works, and that would cost some $60 million. And also on the fish shelter, well, we have worked that out with green groups and also the district council, because very often, if the tidal flow is too rapid, then fish will have to find shelter in these holes, and there the tidal flow or the current would be slower, and it's also less sunny. And that's the recommendation of experts. We've been doing it at other locations, for example, Ho Chong and other areas. And during the past few years, according to our observation, the result has been quite good. All right, members asked you to do something about it, but then apparently you said that you had already done it. So they did not see that you had these suggestions. That's why you said that you have already responded to that in a paper. Is that right? Yes, Director. Well, I didn't specifically. I wasn't there at the meeting, but then when I read the records, well, members read the paper and then they just ask the questions, then I suspect that the reason why members ask the questions, that's why they thought that it might not be adequate. But then we've already answered the question. We told them that there would be details in the enclosure, and I think our members or our colleagues just try to provide further information. Then how about para 2 about the waste, the inert waste? All right, you said that you would ensure that such materials can be recycled so that they would not be dumped in the public fuel reception facility. So what is going to happen then? Well, there would be some 31,000 square meters or cubic meter of waste from the project, but then we'll try to reuse it, and some 30% up to 10,000 will be reused. And for the remaining, most of them would be non-inert materials, and they can always go back to the field bank, and they can also be reused in the future. But then for the materials that will have to go to the landfill is about 1.1, is about 300 cubic meters. Chairman, according to what they said here, you will have to reuse it as soon as possible. But then you've already done it to the best that you can, or is there any further room for further recycling and reuse? Well, as far as this project is concerned, we have already completed the detailed design, and using 30% would already be the best that we can do. I hope that you can redouble your efforts, because, well, I think that has to do with what we're discussing with regard to the expansion of the landfills. I think it's closely related. If you're able to reduce waste, then people can see that the administration has already tried its best, and even if you have to expand the landfills and open more, well, they might find it a little more easy to accept. But then if you just couldn't be bothered, and if you just dump everything into the landfill, then of course they'll find it objectionable. But then has there been any progress? Is 30% the upper ceiling? Well, that's been set out in the paper, and we have also done a second check, and we believe that that's the best that we can do. All right, if there are no further questions. Yes, Tony, Chair. If you have any questions, please make sure that you press the request to speak button. Yes, Tony, Chair. Thank you, Chairman. I support this paper, and I support this proposal. But then on issue 4, I'd like to remind members that because last time there were different bureaus present at the meeting. It's about the redevelopment of the secondary school, and of course that would also affect the footbridge, but then that's not included here. I think if the two policy bureaus can finalize the plan early, that would also facilitate the implementation of the project, so that it would not have to take care of so many things. So it's just a reminder. Thank you. All right, if there are no further questions, then I'll put this to the vote. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the ayes have it. Thank you.
下一個項目係 PWS。
Next item, PWSC 2013-14-22. Is to provide, is to dredge the seabed of the Kwai Tsing Container Basin and portions of the Northern Fairway and Western Fairway, and the cost is estimated at $488.2 million in money of the day prices, and that's to provide sufficient water depth for Kwai Tsing Container Basin and its approach channel, and it's a dredging work of the seabed. And on the 25th of March 2013, the administration consulted the Economic Development Panel on the project, and members expressed their support for this, and the relevant issues were raised, and in response to members' requests, supplementary information was provided on the 3rd of April. With us today, we have Mr. Yao Sheng-mu, Undersecretary for Transport and Housing, and his team. We have Mr. Hon Chi-Kung, Director of Civil Engineering and Development, Mr. Zhang Che-yin, General Manager, Marine Department, and also Mr. Chen Kam-lam, Chief Engineer. Mr. Christopher Chung. Chairman, I'm concerned about the dredging works because the sludge might have some impact. There are 6 major projects, and there'd be special express payment for the fishing industry. But then afterwards, the works will start. But then you're actually extending the difficulty, because after a year or so, after they have returned for fish culture, then you would be dredging the seabed again. It's not just ordinary sludge. In fact, it's contaminated because the sludge has been there for several decades in a container terminal. So actually, it's highly contaminated. Because when we worked on the Central Wan Chai bypass, what was dredged out of Causeway Bay was highly contaminated. So day in, day out, during the tidal flow, you're actually affecting them 3 times, once in or once out. So whenever they get in or get out, they will be affected. And after they have just returned to business after the moratorium, well, that would have very significant implications. So how are you going to ensure that water quality there in those waters would not be affected? And also in dealing with this issue, can you come up with new methods or new approaches? Well, when I was working at the Egg and Fish Advisory Council or meeting, well, actually, the seabed there is highly contaminated and the sludge is seriously contaminated. So can you further process it? I think that can be used for the production or manufacturing of tiles. Why can't you do that? Well, about 4 million cubic meter of sludge will be dredged from the seabed. Sorry, I can't hear you.
About 4 million cubic meters, but they're not all highly contaminated. For a highly contaminated amount, about 17,000 cubic meters, and about 73% of them are of a low contamination level. They are south of Chang Chau, area 42. Every year, along the navigation channel, we would carry out dredging work to ensure safety, and every year we will work with the Marine Department. Yes, we understand that it is of a substantial amount, and I understand your concern. For those that are near Kwai Tsing that are of a higher contamination value, we will remove them away to the Brothers Island before they are disposed of. And out of the 22 sensitive areas, including the mariculture area, there are monitoring stations. Once every 2 days, we will collect water samples, looking at the suspended soil to see if the level is high. And in mariculture, in fish farms, we will also monitor this condition around the clock. But it's not the case that we can detect the level of contamination or toxicity at this instantly. But there is a liaison group. When there are incidents, we will be able to respond immediately. Last year, if the dredging work will affect fish farms within 5 kilometers, then there will be a compensation mechanism in place. And I know that when the dredging work starts, this mechanism will kickstart. They will put in fish fries, and it will affect them. What about you giving them more compensation and ask them to put a stop to it for another 2 years, and then you get on with your work? Otherwise, the impact on fish farmers will be quite significant. So can you speak to the fish farmers, maintain good communications with them? We will definitely maintain communications with fish farmers. When it comes to the compensation mechanism, they can choose. They can choose to close down their fish farms and receive a larger amount in compensation. Paragraph 8 of the document talk about the ultra-large container ships plying international navigation route. The number has increased. If the improvement work is not done, then they will be diverted to neighboring ports, say, for example, Busan, Ningpo, Singapore port. What do you mean by more ultra-large container ships will be diverted? So is it the case that you already know that there are some that has been diverted? In Shenzhen, there is a container terminal as well. So you're saying that for such ships, if they go, they will go over to the other side, to Singapore and over the other side. We see a trend in international voyages that more and more of these ultra-large container ships are used, and there is an increase in the number of orders. We see this trend. And in other countries, particularly our neighboring countries, the depth is a lot deeper than our port. It can be as deep as 16 meters or even deeper. So the condition is slightly better than that of Hong Kong. If we do not maintain our port condition so that it will not be affected by tides for the use of these ultra-large ships, they will have to find other ports to do their businesses. We see this trend. Yes, it's not fully realized yet, but we think we need to do some work as soon as possible because the work will take several years. Ms. Lau, there are some other container terminals near Hong Kong, but it's not mentioned here. Instead, it's mentioned that they will go to Singapore, Busan. So you say that, we will not be able to get their businesses because it's not anywhere near Hong Kong. And you talk about the depth of the harbor. What else? What other factors? Well, in Singapore, say for example, they have a harbor that is as deep as 16 meters in water level. The ships can navigate in and out without being affected by tidal waves. There are more transshipment businesses. So if the number of such ships increase, the transshipment service can increase. So if these ships are not coming to Hong Kong, will they go to Shenzhen, Yantian? In paragraph 8, these ports are not mentioned. Instead, they just mention about these ships being diverted. We need the information. Chairman, it's difficult for us to get an exact figure or information about whether they're leaving for this particular reason. But if the trend remains, that would be the case. I think it really is over the top. What are they scared of? You name these places. If you did not, then I wouldn't have mentioned this. You mentioned that they are going to Singapore, Busan. And if you want to attract more ships, and I ask you to ask the container terminal to treat their workers better. Because of the labor dispute, our image was tarnished. Why wasn't my first question answered? It was very simple. There's something wrong with him. Don't get worked up. We see that the number of ultra-large container ships is increasing, and the other ports have more favorable conditions that attract them. So is it the case that they are leaving? Well, we have yet to find out because we don't have sufficient information. Perhaps you furnish us with additional information after the meeting. Whether these ships go to neighboring port, it depends on the water depth. If it's not sufficient to accommodate 15.5 or 16 meters, they won't go. So please, if possible, furnish us the information. Ms. Chan, you would like to say something? In relation to Ms. Lau's question, let me try to answer. For these ultra-large ships, they are ocean-going from Asia to Europe or America. They handle a lot of transshipment. So you can imagine it's like a passenger making a transfer. If Hong Kong is not a good point of transfer, they will go somewhere else. The shipment is not the final destination for this shipment is not Hong Kong. They will go via Hong Kong. But if we don't have a favorable port, say for example good water depth, then they will choose Ningpo or Singapore to do their transshipment. Mr. Ng Sing. I have a question about seabed in this area. That is part of the Northern Fairway and Western Fairway as well. Before this project, when was such work done? In what years? I believe that this is not the first time when we don't have sufficient water depth. Were there such works done? Were the objectives achieved? And about the 2.5 meter dredging work, how long do you reckon it will take before another similar work has to be done again? Mr. Hon, thank you. As I mentioned, every year we carry out dredging work for the safety of the navigation route. We are in close liaison with the Marine Department. Every year in the Kwai Tsing Basin, we conduct 1 or 2 dredging work. Dredging up 1,000 to 20,000 cubic meters. And for the North Fairway, every year we dredge out about 180,000 or 200,000 cubic meters. The same for the Western Fairway. The design we have is to dig an extra half a meter deeper. We will just conduct a preservation maintenance dredging work for about the 2.5 meters. When do you reckon you will have to carry out the similar works again? If it's done too frequently, it will affect the navigation route. For large-scale ones, I think it will take a long time before we need to do another one. Every year we conduct maintenance work at specific locations where the sludge has accumulated. So you reckon that you won't be doing it in the foreseeable future? As I said, every year we are in contact with the Marine Department to monitor the condition of the seabed. I don't rule the possibility that at specific locations there may be an excessive accumulation. And I've said that we will dig half a meter deeper, so I reckon there won't be large-scale work in the near future. Mr. Tam Yew Chung. Hong Kong's ports are quite good because we have a deep water depth. It's better than Yantian because their water depth is not as good as ours. And I don't object to the proposed works. As Mr. Christopher Chung said, you will have to pay more attention to the impact on fish farmers and the damage done to the seabed. I have a question. At the end of this year, in about December, in Tuen Mun, the sludge treatment work will be commissioned. Is that the case that the sludge dredged will be transported to Tuen Mun to be processed? So you don't have to put them near the Brothers Island. Have you taken that into consideration? Mr. Hon, if I understand it correctly, the sludge treatment work will deal with sludge from sewage, not sludge dredged from the seabed. And as I said, we're talking about a significant amount and a large amount of water from the dredging work. For the sewage treatment, there will be compression process done, so the amount will be much smaller. We're talking about two completely different amounts. And if you want to incinerate sludge, you will have to have a huge plant to deal with such a significant amount. And we're trying to find out new ways to deal with the sludge. We're quite active, say for example, exploring onshore in the nearby areas to find ways to dispose of them. Mr. Sin Chung Kai. Yes, if the maintenance work is done, it will strengthen our position as an international container port. But what about nearby areas? I think it's not your bureau. The Development Bureau thought that there is insufficient land supply, and they identify a number of places in the policy address to build housing blocks. Well, I understand that there was a location over Cheung Kwan O. There was reclamation, and then housing blocks were built, and people have started to live there. But there is an older problem. What about similar problems in the future? As far as I understand, in Qingyi, the CEDD is indeed conducting studies on the possibility of increasing reclamation. As far as we understand, that the land reclaimed will be for industrial use. There is no plan to use them for residential purposes. But now industrial land are being converted to residential uses. So do you think that there is insufficient industrial land? By that I mean logistics and related services, not necessarily industrial buildings. In Qingyi, most of the land is used for logistics or container services. PS, anything to add? Or DS, anything to add? We have yet to confirm the location of reclamation. The preliminary location is southwest of Qingyi, which should not affect the navigation route. But about future land use, we have yet to decide on that. Of course, I don't think it will affect the navigation route, but that is not the point. I'm talking about residents. The land's reclaimed and people start living there, they will be affected. There is a light pollution, noise pollution from vessels plying the area. As I said, that land use is not decided. We have first to decide the location of the reclamation first. Dr. Fernando Zhang. This is to dredge the seabed of the Kwai Tsing Container Basin and fairways. And I think container operators will be the first to benefit because it will be conducive to their businesses. But the bill is paid by taxpayers for the benefit of conglomerates. And what's worse is that the majority of the container terminal is used by one conglomerate. It's a monopoly. So if you use public money to do public works, infrastructural works, for the benefit of a handful of conglomerates, especially when these conglomerates have a poor record of labor welfare. So when you decide on the right to operate, do you build in conditions in the contract that you have or that you will undertake to carry out dredging works, or what?
就
Undersecretary. Well, Chairman, Dr. Cheung's questions can be divided into two parts. Yes, indeed, we have expanded the quantity of the cargo that will be dealt with by the container terminal and also the water depths. It's not just about the operation of the container terminal, it's also about the warehousing and also the workers there. And that's point number one. And secondly, the funding that we're applying for is to dredge the basin and also the fairways with regard to the berths or the berthing area, in particular CT 6, 7, and 9. Well, in the embankment area close to those piers, they will also have to dredge those areas. They will have to dredge it up to 17 or 16.5 meters deep, and therefore they also have to invest in those works. How about the franchise to be issued? So will such projects be included in a contract? Undersecretary. Well, my understanding of Dr. Cheung's question is this. Let me stress once again that the funding application has to do with government's works. It has nothing to do with what they have to dredge near the piers. But then you have not answered my question. That is, in awarding the license to operate the area, have they made any undertaking to the administration that they would also carry out works to dredge the area and also the river or the waters there? Well, if it's in public waters, then of course that's the responsibility of the administration. But then when it comes to their own piers and terminals, of course they have the responsibility to maintain their own terminal to ensure that water depth would be up to standard. Undersecretary, you're very reluctant in answering questions today. Apparently you're just giving the same answer. You're just like a human recorder. I was asking whether or not they've been required to do so in a contract, so the answer is either yes or no. So why don't you just answer the question straight away? Well, let me make it clear. Initially, when we allocate the sites for the operators to run the container terminals, they have to be responsible for everything that has to do with the containers operation so that the operation would be smooth. All right, the Undersecretary might not have expected you to ask such questions containing or concerning the contract details. Therefore, he's not in a position to answer the questions. All right, if you're not prepared today, then please do provide us with the supplementary information after the meeting. Chairman, I'm also concerned about the impact on the fishing industry. Obviously, that would also have some impact on the fishermen, and to a certain extent, that would also cause pollution. So concerning the project, what's the impact on the fishing industry? Because I'm not familiar with that, but then I do hope that Hong Kong's fishing industry can continue to operate. I don't want to see a situation whereby after the completion of works here, the fishermen's industry or the trade will have to shrink, or because of the project, the number of fish catch would be affected, or even public health might be affected. Yes, Mr. Tam Yu Chung and Mr. Christopher Chung have already asked similar questions. Yes, Mr. Chan, well, this was discussed at the Chin Wan District Council. We were concerned about the suspended solids floating around and so on. I'm more concerned about Ma Wan's fish culturists, because some members have asked similar questions just now. Well, for the fish farmers, they're concerned about the disposal of sludge. All right, when you check it out, it might be okay, but then sometimes tidal flow might bring the contaminants to their areas because of a change in the direction of the water flow or the tidal flow. There might be fish deaths and so on. So would you be helping them in monitoring the fish there, so as to ensure that the dredged sludge will not affect them, or there would be no contamination, and some heavy metals might be involved because the area used to be an industrial area, and if fish consume substances containing heavy metal, will that also go into the food chain, affecting public health? So it's a question of the food chain. So will something be done about it? Yes. As I explained briefly just now, we are also very concerned about the area of the dredge and also the surrounding areas. Will that affect the fish farms nearby? And as I said, Lotek 1 would be somewhat closer. It's within a radius of 5 kilometers. And Mr. Chen referred to Ma 1, but then in terms of the distance and also that would be over 5 kilometers away from the site. But then as I said just now, well, in the surrounding waters, well, there would be 20 plus monitoring stations, and that will also cover those fish farms. And also in the location of the fish farms nearby, there would be round-the-clock monitoring, and would be looking at diluted or dissolved oxygen and so on. So these would be the two indicators that are more important. And if we find that in terms of the data collected, if there are problems, then that would also be immediately reflected, and that's under environmental monitoring, and under the permit, the speed of the dredging and also the speed of the vessels or the dredging vessels would also be controlled. But then if the fish farms find out that there are sudden fish deaths, we do have a 24-hour hotline, and they can call us up immediately. We also have a community liaison group, and all the parties would be there, including the AFCD, ourselves, and also the contractors. Every party will be there, and will take immediate action. And on the second question on whether or not the suspended solids would affect the health of fish in the fish farms, as I said just now, well, actually, in the fairway, every year we would carry out some maintenance dredging works. And we've been doing that very carefully in the past. We have not detected such problems in the past. Ms. Alice Mack. Chairman, I'm also concerned about the impact on the fishing trade, in particular in Marwan. What I hope that the department will do is work carefully. There should be more monitoring, and there should also be more liaison with the fish farmers nearby. And if they detect any changes, I hope that the department concerned can deal with that promptly, and as far as possible, you should also compensate them. I'd also like to ask this. It says here that you will have to demolish some of the submarine outfalls near Chengyi. So what is that all about? And why do we have those pipes there? And also, what has that got to do with the fairways? And will water quality nearby be affected? Yes, we are aware of the first point mentioned by Ms. Mack. And also, with regard to the submarine outfalls, actually they are for sludge. But then in the metropolitan area, well, basically all sewage will have to be transported to Stonecutters Island through submarine outfalls. And for such outfalls, they're actually like backup outfalls, for example, if they need to be temporarily discharged. That's why then we will rely on these outfalls. But then as we have to dredge the fairway, it has to be deeper, and therefore certain outfalls might be higher, and therefore we will have to relocate some of them. But then the works would be rather simple in nature, and that will not affect water quality. But then as the submarine outfalls is for or the outfalls are for sewage, well, I'm not familiar with works or engineering things, but then can you assure us that there would be no impact on water quality? Well, the outfalls would only be used once every few years, and therefore the works have nothing to do with the discharge of sewage. Mr. Ma Fong Kwok, I'd like to ask the administration if they have done any assessment on the cost effectiveness, because according to the paper in 2016 there would be in 2012 there was 216 vessels, but then in 5-6 years how many vessels will be using that channel? And if we lose those vessels, then how many what is the economic loss? And also, you're dredging at deep here. Well, I don't know if you've done it before. So have you conducted any heritage assessment or heritage impact assessment? So for new works, will there be heritage sites there? Have you done any assessment? Under Secretary? Chairman? For the egress points for container vessels, in fact, 1/4 are from transshipment, and that would also rely on ULCS and large ships. And for the future trends, as I said earlier, well, there's a growing trend of such ULCS being deployed. And also, when you look at ship liners placing orders for such ULCS, there is also a growing number. And if we do not carry out such works, then in the long run, our competitiveness will be affected. How about the second question? Mr. Ma, what's the second point? How about heritage impact assessment? Well, we'll ask Mr. Hon to answer the question then. Well, thank you. For the under the EIA, we also have this heritage impact assessment under the EIA. We have not detected any heritage sites or areas with archaeological or heritage value. And of course, in the course of our dredging work, if we find such sites, we'll be very careful. All right, if there are no further questions, then I'll put this to the vote. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Yes, Mr. Christopher Chung. Well, next time, if you want to ask questions, please make sure that you press the button. Yes, I'd like to get some information. It's about this project, the timeline. When are you going to dispose the sludge, and also for the location of the monitoring station, and also for the testing that will be carried out? What is the methodology? We have to know it before we can think about it at the FC. Thank you. Mr. Hon? Can you provide the information after the meeting? Dr. Kenneth Chen, Chairman, I'd like to follow up on the impact on the environment. Well, in a paper, apparently you said that there was a lack of internal resources. That's why in the course of the project, you'll be appointing environmental experts, and you'll be setting up environmental monitoring groups. But then there is one area that is rather special to me, so please explain to us. Well, for the liaison group is to be appointed by the contractors, and then subsequently you said that it will be independent from the contractor, and I'm sure the environmental expert would also be engaged by the contractor, even though we said that we would be doing that. But then I'd like to know more about the actual operation. Would the contractor be responsible for engaging and appointing the independent environmental expert? And therefore, in the operation, yes, there are certain items that will be monitoring, for example, the impact on the fish farms and so on. I understand that such data would be collected, and you would also have some measurements which will be released to the public. But then has the administration considered this? That is, if you really want that to be independent, it should have been the administration doing the appointment instead of the contractor doing the appointment. Have you considered that, Mr. Hon? Yes, actually, we're talking about two levels. Well, for the environmental monitoring group, yes, we have to trust that it's independent. But then Mr. Chen was right in that the expert would be appointed by the contractor, but then his work would also be subject to the monitoring by another independent group. And the appointment of that independent group would be done by us. And therefore, we are actually talking about two levels. One is for the day-to-day monitoring work is independent, but then is the contractor who will be doing the appointment. But then for what is being done, we will also be setting up an independent task group to monitor the work. So the $2.6 million will be given to the contractor, and then the contractor will appoint the environmental monitoring group. Is that right? So there will be an environmental checker to be appointed by the contractor. But how about the actual work? Well, I'll ask the chief engineer to give you the details. All right, thank you. Well, for the $2.6 million on the IEC and independent expert services, well, that's the independent environmental checker to be appointed by the administration. And as we have said in the paper, so that would be distributed between the professionals and also the independent monitor.
Okay.
If there are no questions, I put it to a vote. Ms. Emily Lau, you would like to ask questions? Yes. I'd like to ask about the fisheries industry. You estimate that there will be death cost to the fish farms, and you said you will contact the contractors. What is the situation? Well, we don't want to cause any death of any fish in the farms or anywhere, and in the process, the environmental permit regulates the speed of the work and also the number of dredgers. And we also have silk curtains enclosing the grabs of the sludge. And we also put in place monitoring stations. There are also round-the-clock monitoring stations, and there is also a hotline if if a fish is dying, they can contact us. But it doesn't mean that we think there will definitely be fish dying as a result. You said that there will be mitigation measures. What are they? If indeed something happens, of course, we will look into it. And if there is a possibility that it is a result of dredging, then we will immediately slow down the speed of our work, and we will exercise extra caution. We'll look into the cause of the incident before we proceed. So you will maintain close liaison with the fish farmers. They will be able to contact you immediately should there be anything, and then you will take immediate actions. If there are no other questions, I will put this to a vote. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise their hands. I think this item is agreed by members. Next is PWSC 2013-14, number 23. This is a proposal to upgrade 49 TF to Category 8 at an estimated cost of 609.7 million in money of the day prices for the construction of additional floors at Central Piers numbers 4, 5, and 6. And on the 24th of May this year, the administration consulted the transport panel. The panel indicated support of the proposal. You will find the information tabled in front of you of the salient points in discussion. We have with us the Undersecretary for Transport and Housing, Mr. Yao Xingmu. Deputy Secretary for Transport and Housing, Transport to Mr. Andy Chan. We have also Principal Assistant Secretary for Transport and Housing, Director of Civil CEDD, Assistant Commissioner of the Transport Department, and Chief Engineer of the CEDD. Mr. Leung Chi-Chang. Thank you. In relation to the construction of additional floors, well, I do think that the piers are quite worn down, so I support the construction works. But I don't think your estimates are very accurate. First, after the redevelopment, there will be some benefits, and the benefits will be used to subsidize the ferry services. And it said in the paper that for the free piers, the demand is low, so there is a need for subsidy. And you're going to turn these 3 piers into beautiful piers, thereby generating extra revenue in the range of $27 million to $69 million. But I can't get the impression that the 3 piers will attract extra footfall to spend. And without that, you won't be able to receive the revenue as estimated. This will then become another white elephant. Yes, the intentions of carrying out these works are good, but in the end you may not get what you hoped for. So how do you conduct the assessment of the expected revenue? Under Secretary, in relation to the increase of floor areas so that more retail or business activities can be accommodated there to generate extra revenue for the subsidy is something that is agreed by legislators. Because in this way, there is it won't be as necessary for the administration to provide services, to provide assistance or subsidies to the ferry services. In 2011, there was a feasibility study done on retail services at the piers. Of course, there are a number of premises. It depends on the length of the term, the mode of operation, and the integration with central harbourfront. The findings of the feasibility study suggest that it will generate a range of rental revenue from $27 million to $69 million. And at this stage, we can't get the exact figure because it's dependent on the number of factors I've just outlined. So our proposal is to just first start with the construction or redevelopment of the piers. This will give us time to consider and deal with issues about the future operations and how to implement it. This is an estimate. This is more or less equal to the amount provided by the administration to ferry operators. Well, I don't really understand. In the paper, you talk about a low patronage of ferry services. That's why there is a need of subsidy. And then, on the other hand, you want to redevelop the piers. Well, usually they're passengers who will go to the superstructure to spend, not other visitors. We're only talking about a small area, just over 10,000 square meters. So I think it will be a kind of half-baked effort. So how do you attract extra visitors, those other than passengers? Members have put forward a very important point. This investment is not just about patching up the piers. You see, this redevelopment in a concept, design, and planning will be part of the central harbourfront. The piers will be linked up with the retail and commercial areas in Central. It provides a very important public space, attracting visitors. So apart from ferry passengers, members of the public can use the space, and is specially designed to take into account the needs of non-passengers. They will be able to use the public space at the ferry piers. And this is a very special design feature. Mr. Lam, I'm not worried about a lack of footfall or insufficient footfall. If you beautify it, it will be like IFC2. It's very beautiful and it's linked by footbridges. What I am concerned is whether the administration will, after making this space so beautiful, and then hand over this to the ferry operators for them to make money. When I read the paper, paragraph 6 to 8, and also paragraph 19, that is, they went to the transport panel on the 24th of May, questions were asked, but the answers were not clearly stated in the paper. You mentioned about the revenue of $27 million to $69 million. Will it go straight into the pocket of the ferry operators? Or is it the case that the administration will take the revenue and then the administration will decide whether to operate it themselves or to outsource it, or use the money received to pay towards the ferry operators as subsidies? And the Secretary, I've already explained about that. Our idea is that the rental revenue generated from the 3 piers will be used to support the operation of the ferry services. That is very clear. The money will not be used for other purposes. And as to how we can go about doing it to maximize the benefit to the ferry operations, we will work on it later. There will be further studies. There can be a single agent or run by different operators. Everything is open, and we will later look into the issues to find the best solution. We want to maximize the benefit so that we can subsidize the ferry operators from this project. So from what I hear, they don't rule the possibility that they spend $600 million on this project and then they will hand over this on a silver plate to the ferry operators for the operators to run the place, and then they will wash their hands if that's the case. I think our main concern or main consideration is we are looking into letting it run by different ferry operators. Of course, there may be problems, say for example competitions among themselves, poor operation or lack of experience. There is another possibility, a single agent or manager to oversee the commercial space. So as to which one is better in terms of economic benefits or regulation, we will look into it later. I only have 1 more minute, and I would like to ask this. Under Secretary, you said that you will look into it, whether it is the administration will put it into its own pocket first, and then take it out to subsidize the ferry operators. So when will you make a decision? In the last transport panel meeting, we've already talked about our policy on ferry services. The current license will expire in 2014. Between 2014 and 2017, since the ferry piers have yet to have all the work completed, there won't be additional revenue generated. So prior to 2017, there is abundant time for us to work on this specific design on the operation of the space to generate maximum revenue. So can you undertake to us that before you make a decision, you will come back to the panel to discuss it with us? When it comes to the operation policies and the form of subsidy, of course, we will report to the panel. Mr. Tam Yu Chung.
Well, Chairman, I agree with the direction of the administration that you will beautify the pier, and after it's been beautified, then there will be more commercial activities and commercial revenue that will be used to subsidize the operational cost. Because if you just rely on patronage or receipt from the ferry services, then that might not be adequate, and therefore you will have to get more revenue from other sources in order to subsidize the overall cost. But then there are 3 piers here, and the way it is done here leaves something to be desired. All right, there is a footbridge connecting IFC, and then directly from the footbridge is the Discovery Bay pier. But then if you require people to walk be connected to the other piers one by one, and if you have a footbridge connecting all the piers, then that would be a thoroughfare connecting all the 3 piers. I think that would be more desirable, so that they do not have to come down from the footbridge every time they have to go to a different pier. And also in the past, well, amongst these piers, very often the space can be used for commercial activities. There used to be bazaar, and on some occasions they've actually rented the space for exhibitions and for publicity on exhibitions and so on. Well, that's most profitable. But then for the other users, say retail and bazaar and so on, it's not very attractive. Only very few people would be attracted. So you will have to think about it, or else after spending more than $600 million on it, then it will not be very cost effective, because for the residents living in the outlying islands, they would not be very interested, and therefore you will have to attract more outsiders so that they will go there to enjoy themselves, to have fun and so on. And also, other than eateries, restaurants and retail business, you can also think about using that for more integrated uses instead of just using it for one purpose. Well, if you're actually offering very much the same thing in each pier, why do they bother to go to individual piers? And also, if you look at the design, apparently you will be providing escalators and lifts. But then I think it's a common problem for many shopping centers. For the lifts, they are very small and very cramped, and therefore people have been forced to use the escalators. But then here, it's not very practicable, because as you might have noticed, there are many people who are actually wheelchair bound, and also they're also using more baby props, and therefore for lifts, I can see that there are 2, but then they look very small in size. So you will have to pay more attention to that, because once you have a baby cart there, then it will take up a lot of space, and if it's not very convenient, then people will simply choose not to go there. So in the design, you will have to conduct more studies. I don't know what's happening with the Star Ferry. You will have to make sure that it's attractive. It has its own characteristics. But then in Central, I think this location is rather off limit, because it's quite far away from the busiest area in Central. You will have to increase its attractiveness before you can get more rent receipt. And apparently the range is very wide, ranging from some $20 million to $60 million. All right, if you're not able to do that, then the business will be poor, and then it will be a waste of the money that you spent. Who else would like to ask questions? All right, we have 12 in a queue, and we have 2 more items that we have to deal with today. And if everybody is given 5 minutes, then for the other 2 items, there is no time left. So what's your view? So, can you be more brief and concise? If it has to do with future use, then maybe it's not the right occasion to raise them, because you still have a chance to talk to the THB at the transport panel. I'm sure they'll come back to consult you. All right, if that's okay, then 3 minutes each. Chairman, obviously this is a rather controversial issue. This did not happen to the other two items. So if we do not have time, then we can defer the other two to the next meeting. Yes, I think the transport panel has already had a very detailed discussion on that, and some of the issues raised by members just now were already raised at the transport panel meeting. But of course, I respect your views. And if you think that 3 minutes is too short, and if you want 4 minutes, then I'll of course respect your views. I hope that we can be given 5 minutes. All right, please be brief and concise. You don't necessarily have to use up all the time that has been given to you. Okay. If we are not able to deal with the two remaining items, then we'll inform the officials and we'll arrange for a special meeting to deal with the outstanding items. Yes, Mr. Christopher Chung. Well, Chairman, I think there are two disadvantages. First, the location. All right, it's in the heart of Central. It's right next to Victoria Harbour. And still, you're not going to do a landmark project there if you have not engaged the HKIA, the Institute of Architects, to do something here. Making sure that it's a landmark project, then I think it's really a big failure on the part of the administration. You will have to think about it. Secondly, in terms of the cost, all right, I've been living in Central for several decades, and many middle class are interested in going to Central during the weekend. And I think the alfresco restaurant near Star Ferry has been very popular, and also you're talking about $20 to $60 million in terms of rental every year, and actually you're talking about $750,000 to $1.5 million a month. Well, a shop in Central would cost a lot more than that. So this is a premium site, and it's like premium office accommodation. Why can't you allow independent people to run the business there? So you should have engaged an independent surveyor to do the job. I think it's an insult to not just us. It's actually an insult to C.Y. Leung. He's a surveyor. There is no way that this place could cost that cheap. $750,000 for the entire pier. I would be interested in renting that. So if you're able to get good rentals there, then for outlying island residents, they can just take the ferry for free. So you will have to think carefully about this. There is no way that it can just turn out that low a rent every month. Well, there are 2 points that I'd like to respond to. First of all, as you can see here, we're actually working on the redevelopment of the three piers, and also the redesigning, and also packaging or the building works for these piers. But then that will also be connected to the future waterfront promenade. In fact, that has to do with what Mr. Tam just said. So for the three piers, they are not going to be connected by the existing footbridge, because there will be footbridge and there will be boardwalk, and they will have direct access to the first floor of the pier, and therefore it's going to be a new public open space to be created. It's to be one thoroughfare, and therefore from IFC2 people can be brought out to the pier from IFC2. So it's going to be very nice and smooth. And for the revenue that we project, of course, is a conservative projection, but then there are several scenarios, and in the best case scenario, then of course the revenue will be somewhat higher than expected. And as members have rightly pointed out, whether or not we're going to allow for one operator to do it, or are we going to have separate operators doing the job, well, we will consider members' views, and we will consider that very carefully. Well, Chairman, I suggest that you should engage some independent surveyor to do an assessment on the value of the plot. I think you've underestimated that by 3 to 5 times. Yes, Tony Chair. Chairman. Well, on the 24th of May, last month, the transport panel was very concerned about this, and we wrote to them asking about the mode of operation, the design, the revenue, the rent, and so on, and also the construction costs and so on. So I hope that the Bureau Director can give us an early reply. And my question has been asked by many members just now. Well, concerning the rents and also the operation, well, I think that has to do with how the operation will go, and it will also affect the evaluation. I hope that the administration will do the evaluation soon, because in terms of the operation, you will also have to make sure that the design will tie in with its future operation. And of course, we want the yield to be the highest and the return will be the highest, because in that way we'll be able to cross-subsidize the ferry services. But then if you do not do it now, then in the future, if you have to remedy the situation, it could be very costly. It's like the shopping center in IFC. I think the rentals for different shop premises would vary. It depends on the location, the design, the layout, and everything. And if you think that it's going to be run like a ferry pier, and therefore you're not too bothered by the size, and therefore the commercial value, the mode of operation in the future would not be very good, and it's like so all the money would be going down the drains. And also in para 12, you also give a breakdown of the estimates, but then you talk about enhancing the current GFA, but then you've just given us the average cost without all the details. I don't think that's good enough. Yes, I'm a surveyor myself, and I hope that you can give us all the details, because I'm concerned about the construction cost. You can give us more detailed breakdown. If you have a material surveyor doing the job, you can also give us the details, because I'm concerned that this is actually additional works on the superstructure, and if you are able to get a quantity surveyor to do the evaluation, please do give us the breakdown. Yes. On the construction cost, let me set it out very clearly. All right, this is just some estimates, and I'm sure Mr. Chair would be aware of that, and we will have to get the bids from the tendering exercise before we can get the quotations. And also we have made reference to reclamation project of phase 7 for Piers 7 and 8, and also the reclamation project in Central. And we have got some project estimates there, and we got the figures from those works. But then, as I've set out in the paper, it's not just about the commercial floor space. Actually, there are other alternation works. The GFA would also be included here. But then we have tried to simplify the figures. But then if you want detailed breakdown, I don't have them with me. I can provide that later. But then you're actually talking about huge amounts of money. I think you also have a lot of quantity surveyors within the administration. Why have you not asked them to do it? I think this is highly transparent, and if you can disclose everything, then when people put in their bids, would the administration be losing out in the end? I think that's for everybody to see. Even if you just do a rough estimate, you can still do it. I don't think this is a unique project. Actually, you're actually doing some fitting out works, but then there are also piers that are newly constructed. So what is going to happen to this? Well, I think Mr. Chair might be of the view that is somewhat too costly. But then actually the piers are already there, and we are just modifying the structure, and we are just trying to add one staircase, and also some internal fitting out works, and some of the piers might also have to be reprovisioned. For example, we have to maintain the operation of a particular pier while the fitting out works are carried out. That's why the cost might be somewhat higher, but then we have actually gone through the procedure. I was just saying that we didn't have the figures with us now. All right, please give us the details later, because in the course of the works, as you said, there might be measures that have to be taken in order to make sure that the current operation would not be affected. And also, as this is fitting out works, it's not just building something out of nowhere. Actually, you're actually carrying out works on top of the existing superstructure. Yes, Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the construction of this pier, the overriding principle is that you'd like to generate some non-ferry service revenue or receipt in order to support the ferry services. But then in the paper, you're actually talking about the 3 piers and also the related works.
We say that the revenue can be different, as the member suggested, from your estimate. And you told me that there may be new mode of operation. But I see that there will be a landscape deck linking the piers and the IFC. This will in turn affect the revenue, because this is an important part. I believe that the landscape deck will come to us in a separate paper for funding approval. So in terms of planning, if the operation of the pier, will the operation of the pier be linked closer to the operation of the landscape deck? It can be used as a linkage and also a recreational space, or maybe an exhibition space, which is in shortage in Hong Kong. This will give more flexibility and elbow room for the use of the fund, and then it will in turn go towards this subsidy of the ferry services. The design of the central harbour front include a landscape deck. This will be linked to the piers and also the deck. But this is at the conceptual stage. About the interchange of the central Wan Chai bypass is going on at full swing. So we have yet to get the details of this. I fully understand that. The most important objective of the piers is to help the administration extract itself from the responsibility of subsidizing the operators. So we're talking about 2 important investments: the redevelopment of the piers and the landscape deck. If we cannot create a synergy to maximize the revenue to subsidize the ferry services, then in some way the investment is a failure. So you will have to take the 2 together in your consideration. And I've asked this question in the transport panel. Mode of operation of the pier seems to be subject to restrictions of the Town Planning Board. So the TPB, as far as I understand, were it not for this cross-subsidy, there is no need for redevelopment work. So did the TPB consider this? That is, the operation of the piers should aim at maximizing revenue for the cross-subsidy. Undersecretary. Yes, it's very clear that the landscape deck should be linked with the piers. And in the design, connectivity, we bear that in mind when we're doing such work. And when it comes to the relations of the pier and the waterfront, we share the same view. Well, perhaps you answer the TPB question first. Well, that is the second point. We have to take this into consideration. The piers will have to provide ferry services and at the same time open to use for non-passengers without damaging the harbor. We can't simply turn them into offices. So these are the factors that they need to take into consideration. Mr. Chan, the TPB is fully alive to the fact that the objective of the ferry pier is to generate revenue for cross-subsidy to the ferry operators. So when it comes to the design, the operation, the management, they will all have to be most effective so that ferry fares will be stabilized as a result. Ms. Emily Lau. I support strongly the cross-subsidies of the ferry fares because the residents of outlying islands have been protesting for a number of years because it's very unfair to them, because in remote places in the New Territories, roads are improved and constructed for them, but whereas outlying island residents, nothing is done for them. So they would like to get some kind of subsidy as to help them. Now there is a ferry pier, there is commercial activities and restaurants. I don't think it's a very good thing. Victoria Harbour is the biggest appeal of Hong Kong. Why don't you attract more people there? And according to the Tourism Commission, they said that the Avenue of Stars is a big attraction. You see that there are restaurants and shops along the Avenue of Stars. So do you think the situation is so poor? Well, you might have done a lot of things, and some people say that is a white elephant. What will happen in the end? Is there some way that a path that you can do so you can generate revenue to subsidize the ferry pier and at the same time attracting visitors to spend, to eat, and to admire the harbour front? You now think about the project, think about the mode of operation. What if it doesn't turn out the way you want it to be? Undersecretary, and as to how to further beautify our waterfront, that is actually an idea of the administration. What's the current problem? Well, the problem is that it is mainly for ferry services. There is insufficient space for retail and commercial activities or restaurants. So there is limitation of space. So this is to construct additional floors 1.5 to increase floor space. So on this day, currently there is a limited space. Is it just about space? You need to attract visitors to some appeals to lure them. If it's boring or monotonous, it doesn't matter that it's huge. And I don't want to see designer shops, designer brands. Otherwise, it will be just another white elephant. You have to think about appeals to attract local and overseas visitors to visit the place. Mr. Chan, anything to add? Ms. Lau has pointed out the crux of the problem. Well, sometimes whether a place is popular is about class and footfall. Are there facilities to attract visitors? Or is it like what Mr. Tam said, that it is quite remote? Currently it is, but with the landscape deck, you can walk straight out from the IFC. So it's rather convenient, and you can say that it's a continuation of the shopping mall. So it's different. Yes, this proposal is about constructing another 1.5 floors, but as a whole, we renovate the entire pier to move it up a notch in class. Currently, the license is affected by the legislation, which states that each license will last for 3 years. So the current mode of operation is to let the operator run the retail space. If there is only 3 years, it's very difficult for them to look further than that. So we also look into legislative amendments to extend the period of license to more than 3 years. The Transport Department is responding to us quite warmly, and next time we will come back to you. Well, you talk about IFC2, so it will be a pier with designer shops. You need to turn it into a place where everyone can enjoy, not just for the rich and powerful, where they shop for designers brand. So this will be more in the middle of the road, kind of like Harbourfront Soho. Dr. Fernando Zhang. I agree that the pier should not be considered only from the perspective of commercial operation. If you need to use that to subsidize ferry services, of course we support it, because outlying island residents pay a lot for transport expenses. I'd like to get more information. After the redevelopment, how much more revenue can the ferry operators receive as a result? Of course, you have to look at the financial viability. I'm concerned that apart from the increase of commercial value, that this place must be opened for the use of the general public, instead of turning it into another expensive area with designer shops. You can also use this place to promote local economy. Say, for example, for people who are interested in running an organic market. Store owners need markets in the form of a bazaar. I see that in overseas countries, in the central business districts, during weekends and holidays, it's turned into a farm fest. This is an appeal to visitors, and at the same time it promotes local economy. Please consider it. And in relation to the design, I see that from the paper you said that it will improve the accessibility for people with disabilities within the piers. Well, how do you do it? Toilets is a main concern for the elderly and people with disabilities, but there is no elaboration on toilets. Can you give me more information? Undersecretary. Perhaps I will respond to the number of issues raised first before I hand over to my colleagues. Dr. Chiang talks about commercial elements and operations. You can give us information after the meeting. Paragraph 8 have set out the amount. Mr. Hon, I will defer to Mr. Mack, our Chief Engineer. In relation to accessibility for people with disabilities, we've added lifts. 3 lifts in each pier, reaching different floors. So they can take the lift to the 4th floor to the deck. They can also go to the 5th floor to the open space. When it comes to toilets for the disabled, on the On the ground floor, where people wait for ferries, there is a toilet for the disabled, and we will put in such toilets on different floors. We also have a braille map and tactile guide path, and there will be improvement works.
Can you clarify? So there will be a disabled toilet on every floor? Yes, that can be arranged. So definitely there will be, yes. I'd also like to clarify for the 3 lifts. Are you asking them to use the cargo lifts for firemen? No, actually, either lift can have direct access to the 5th floor. So the passenger lifts can be used by the disabled, yes. Mr. Ng Sing, thank you, Chairman. On this particular item, I remember during the 2nd term of this council, well, back then, councillors also heard that some people from the business sector also gave their feedback on the pier, and therefore I have some reservation about this, and the reason is very simple. And during the previous terms of government, I think some relevant parties should have the responsibility to follow up on this. All right, this is part of the mass transit project, and on top of that, we also have this pier. But then for outlying islands residents, is an issue of a cross subsidy, and we should have adopted this approach. In other words, there will be cross subsidy, but then there are also other commercial activities that can cross subsidize such users, so that users can reduce their cost. So I think the piers are located in a very good location, as many members have pointed out. That's why I think we should give it more thoughts. That is, we should have commercial operations. I've heard some from the business sector saying that they would be willing to put in bids, and whether you are actually bundling several piers together into one tender or what. So they will be footing the bill. They will be paying for that, and they will run the operations, the commercial operations there, and then the receipt can be used to subsidize the ferry services. That would be like what a real commercial world should be operated, so that instead of having the administration letting out the premises with a rental receipt of about $20 to $60 million, I think it's not pure commercial operation. You should have offered the premises in the form of a tender, and then the commercial sector or the business sector will bid the operations. But then you would also have to spell out how the future ferry operations would be operated, so the residents will be able to get reasonable fares. I think only then will we be able to serve the community. Very rarely would I be speaking out like that, but I hope that the administration will consider this more carefully. And if you can defer this until later, if there is no urgency about this, then you should have changed your conventional mindset. In the past, you were not inclined to using the forces of the business sector in subsidizing such operations, and therefore I have some reservation about this. I think you should give it more thoughts. Under Secretary, your response, please. Well, Chairman, I'd like to make it clear here. With regard to the pier works, I think there are 2 purposes to be served. Number 1, the ferry services, and the pier can be used by the users and also the passengers. And number 2 is an extension of the central waterfront, and these are the 2 functions to be served by the piers. And of course, for the construction cost and the investment cost, if it's entirely funded by business operations, will that be able to fully take care of the part that would not be profitable? We do have some skepticism about this. We have some reservation. But then if you just look at the future operation, it's not about the cost of construction. All right, for that part, can that be used for more commercial operations? Yes, there is room and time for us to further look into, and we can also take on board members' views just now. Mr. Ung Singh, just one last supplement. Well, I think in the end, the commercial contract must be adequate to safeguard the interests of the passengers of the ferry services. You will also have to ensure safety of the operation. And therefore, if you can have an open mind, if you're willing to take it up with the developers or contractors, then I think your consultant can also look into it. And if you can re-embark on that track, and if it's found to be better, instead of spending $700 million in the project when no one is fully confident in this, and if the contractor is able to take it up, whether it's for 5 years, 10 years, then at least they'll be able to guarantee that there will be a subsidy for the ferry services, ensuring lower fares. But as I've already explained the details just now, well, yes, we have also considered the issue of cross-subsidy for the ferry operator. But then on the whole, is part of the public open space and also the central waterfront, and also it has to be accessible to the non-ferry service users. Well, I think we will have to invest in the infrastructure first before we take the matter forward. Alice Mack, well, as some members have said, if the revenue is to be plowed back to the ferry operations, then of course we would support that. But then we are concerned if they'll be able to yield any revenue and whether or not it's sufficient. And therefore, the mode of operation in the future would be important. And also, is the design attractive enough? Will people be attracted to rent the space? Will it be turned into another Soho? Or will the design be too awkward to the extent that it's not attractive and it cannot be turned into another Soho? And also, we also talk about the access for the disabled. This is also what I'm most concerned about. All right, from IFC, you will have to come down from the footbridge. Will you then be able to go back up? You will have to ensure that it's absolutely convenient. And also, well, for lifts, well, obviously, they are not going to be used solely by the disabled, and people using babies, strollers, prams will also be using the lifts. So will the lifts be large enough? I understand that for many government lifts and elevators during holidays and weekends, they will be very crowded, and as soon as there are 1 or 2 baby prams or strollers in the lifts, then no one else can get in. And thirdly, I agree that on the rooftop, that is on the upper floors, well, you think that there can be operations like those in Soho, but then on the ground floor, for the ferry floors or where passengers would be staying. All right, if you've been taking ferries to outlying islands, you know that during holidays and weekends when people are waiting for their ferries, they would like to buy some snacks and refreshments, and they would not be going up to the higher floors to buy other things. All they need would be some snacks where they can consume on board of the ferry. So I hope that the ferry terminal building can be more diversified, so that for the lower floors they can be used by the local passengers, and then it would fit, it would serve their consumption pattern. And then for the upper floors, it can be really like Soho, because the purpose is not for people to make money, but then if they are able to make some money, then the money or the proceeds can be used to subsidize the ferry operation, so that the fares do not have to be so expensive. Yes. Well, our design is that there will be 3 lifts, and they are the ordinary standard lifts in shopping centers, and therefore both the handicapped and also the baby strollers or prams can use them. And actually, we also have a set of escalators, so it's really like escalators in shopping centers, and therefore for people using the center, they can use the escalators, and therefore the lifts would be left for the disabled and also those using baby prams and strollers. Yes? Under Secretary, what about the operations, the mode of operation? All right, the mix of operations. Well, just now we have noted the views from many members that would be very useful in considering how the venue should be managed and the mix of operations. Well, Chairman, I'd like to mention this as well, because I've actually been bound in a wheelchair for several months because of some injuries on the legs. And you refer to escalators. Well, for those who are wheelchair bound and those using prams and also those using baby strollers and prams, they won't be able to use the escalator. The only thing that they can use is the lift. All right. You might think that for the able-bodied they'll use the escalators, but then others will use the lifts. But then that might not be the case. If you look at government footbridges, actually, well, even for people who are able-bodied, they will still use the lifts. So what we don't want to see is, well, because of the access problem, some disabled might find it too inconvenient, and also going into the lift, and then after they've got out from the lift, they will have to board the ferry. Everything will have to be very convenient. All right, please don't think that if you're on a wheelchair, it's okay if somebody is pushing the wheelchair, because if the facilities are not convenient, if it's not properly designed, then everybody will be in danger. Both the one sitting on the wheelchair and the one pushing it will be in danger. And also for the pier close to the pavement, you will have to ensure that there will be direct access. Yes, Mr. Chen Hangpan. Chairman, concerning the piers in Central that have to be developed in order to subsidize the ferry fare, I think is good. But then the receipt or the revenue will have to do with the ferry fare, and therefore we would like to see a high yield so that it can be used to subsidize the ferry services. But then we also hope that the piers will be appealing to all visitors, and the government is not known to be good at doing business. I think the business sector is, and therefore I agree with what Mr. Ng Lang Sing just said. Mr. Ng Lang Sing made a suggestion, and I hope that the administration will consider it carefully. I think we should introduce more innovation from the business sector and more business funds into the operation. I think only the business sector knows the best as to how best it can be operated. Apparently, the design for the three piers is identical. So, given the fact that the three piers will look identical, then will that mean that the three piers will not have their own appeals? Will that just be used for running small tuck shops and restaurants and so on, other than building it or branding it as another Soho? What else can be done there? Chairman, is it that we're not going to talk about the operations? Yes, we still have other chances to talk about the operation. I've noticed that in the layout plan here, every floor there will be plant rooms, and as another member has said, well, there will be plant rooms on every floor, and the location is rather central. So what's the purpose of having these plant rooms on every floor? And what purpose will they serve? Why do they have to be so centrally located? Yes, Mr. Mack? Well, basically the design of the pier and the layout is rather flexible. For example, we have reserved some space for restaurants and retail services, but then they can be flexibly changed in accordance with market demand. With regard to the plant room, well, there are plant rooms in the existing pier. Well, we do have this cock loft plant room, but then after the additional floors have been added, well, there will be air conditioners and drains and pipes and so on. That's why we have to expand the cock loft layer, and that would not affect the GFA for the other floors. Mr. Chen, do you really need to have an entire floor for the plant? Because apparently the scale is really very large. because some fire safety facilities and water services and so on, well, we do need to have a sizable area for all those utilities. It's already 10:15. I'm afraid we won't be able to finish up the other two items. And as the officials are watching the broadcast, I'm afraid we will have to arrange for another session to deal with the two outstanding items. We have 6 more members who would like to ask questions. Next, Ms. Chen Yun Han.
Well, I want to start with, well, they've already gone through the panel, but still a lot of members have raised a lot of issues. My main concern is what will be the result of the project. Well, if it's very well done, then I'm not worried about footfall. I love hiking. Outlying islands are somewhere that I would go. But if it's poorly done, it's a completely different matter. I have a lot of questions and problems about the design. I've been to similar piers overseas. They have similar designs. I don't object to the plant room on a floor, on a certain floor. It seems that every department hog what they don't need. Yes, I agree that you need some room to put your plants, but you don't need to hog everything. I agree that you need workspace. It seems that all departments are carving some part of a floor out for themselves. What is left in the end for the public? In Chicago, the piers are wonderful. So are those in Australia and Seattle. You talk about restaurants on lower floors too. But the design I see is just kind of like a template. It seems that on every floor, a department have carved out some space for its own use. Do I have to support the original design? I have doubts about it. I've been dealing with issues for over 10 years with professionals, surveyors, architects. This could have been very beautiful. You have to accord priority to hardware. I do have problems with that. Why do you need a plant room and a maintenance floor on the 4th floor? You only need a gangway. Why do you need such a large space on the 4th floor? I don't agree with your design. You have to start from scratch. I heard Miss Chan's comments. So what are you going to do with it? Let me first explain. There is a cook loft on the 2nd floor. It's a plant room. I have no problem with that. Please let me finish. You will get more information from enclosure 6. If you look at enclosure 6, it's a section diagram. Section diagram. You see that this cook loft originally is the plant room. It's a floor with a plant room. We construct a half a floor there, and above that you see there is for retail and commercial, and that's more over to the Victoria Harbour side. So you see that people using such facilities can get all the way to the Victoria Harbour. If you look at the 4th floor, access, food and beverage, on commercial services, and over to the area closer to the harbour, outdoor commercial area in public viewing deck. And 1 floor up is a public open space for the entire floor. So it's for public enjoyment. Look at the next one, enclosure 6. It's the overall view. Even for visitors who don't use the restaurants, so they can go to the top deck. It's the entire rooftop plus part of the 4th floor. It's got full view of the harbour. So there is no need for you to explain. I think it's quite stretched, your explanation. I support your idea, but not really your design. Well, you see, for a cruise ship, there will be a lot of machinery, but there is nothing on upper deck. I support your proposal, and I agree with what members said. But this, we're talking about public space. You need to give small retailers some space. A lot of people go to City Super to shop, and I think it is an area for organic vegetables. For Bloomberg, you know that he's also given a lot of opportunities for small operators. I just want a solution, but I don't want a simple one. So if there is any way you can improve the design. I understand the concern of Ms. Chan, but we have gone through public engagement exercise. We've listened to public views. If there is room for improvement, we will do it as far as possible. We try to open as much space to the public as possible. Mr. Albert Chan. Yes, we've been waiting for a long time for the redevelopment of the piers. You remember that for Salon. Well, previously there was Henderson Land. Well, previously they had an idea and a design for the pier. They had a grand idea for the cultural center that from above it looks like a big bird with its wings spanned fully. But when it comes to these design technocrats, well, for Tsuen Wan, Sha Tin, Tuen Mun, the 3 halls are exactly the same. I think you can do better. And we're talking about a landmark of Hong Kong. I seldom agree with Christopher Jung, but what he said just now was to the point. This is Hong Kong's landmark. I think it is just slightly better than the design of the ocean terminal. You fail to highlight the special characteristics. The 6 piers should be designed as a whole and turn it into a landmark of Hong Kong. When it comes to overseas countries where piers are redeveloped, Boston, Baltimore, San Francisco, London, the design for their waterfront is beautiful. The Sydney Darling Harbour we've previously visited have got special characteristics, but this is just mediocre, unremarkable. We are eclipsed by overseas piers, and I'm very disappointed. And if I'm to vote, I will vote against it. Of course, I agree that the redevelopment should start as possible so that the revenue can be used to subsidize ferry operators. But I don't agree with letting the operators run the public space. Say, for example, you can give $200 million a year for the ferry operators, set an amount, and then require the contractor to set aside a certain amount from the operating expenses to the ferry operators. Set a percentage. It's meaningless to use the revenue. For a lot of shopping malls, they have revenues, and then they also have the sharing of profits. That's the case for Lingrit, whether it's shopping malls or restaurants. Apart from the revenue, they ask to share your profit, 5% or 10%. So it's meaningless to talk about rental because you don't know about the other terms in the contract. So when it comes to the mode of operation and the design, if you're talking about funding first and then further discussion, I don't agree with that. The operators needs to decide on the layout, on the details. But if you just give them the product, then in the end they will have to change entirely the entire plan. That'll be meaningless. Yes, you should give them the direction, but not the details. I will vote against it. Can you give us a design from scratch, like what Christopher Jones said? I seldom agree with him, but this time I do. You need to turn it into a landmark that we are proud of and not just another ocean terminal. Undersecretary. We've gone through different stages in Town Planning Board, public consultation, and the Harbourfront Commission. So we've spent quite a lot of time on that. Then why didn't you start the public consultation earlier? But it started early. We're talking about the design. When did you consult the public? There were workshops. Director, could you answer maybe? Previously, we have put forward preliminary designs, which were deemed to be unsatisfactory, and there were several rounds of adjustments, fine-tunings, through different panels, committees, and district consultations. In the end, we find a design that is agreeable to all. But we understand that people see things differently, and this one in general meets the aspiration of the majority of the people. But then I need more information about the entire public consultation process and give us the design of Henderson Land so that we can make a comparison. And I also need to separate it to a vote in the Finance Committee so that we can have a separate discussion. Mr. Ma Fong Kwok. This is a novel idea. I see eye to Mr. Ng Liang Sing. 10 years ago when we were legislators, there was an issue. It's a proposal made by a developer. We were dragging our feet and it's been 10 years. So I agree with the idea of the administration. That is, this will in turn become a subsidy to ferry operators. And in this way, we have to maximize the revenue. It's IRR 5.8 to 14%. If it's 5.8%, you better forget it. Because this is an important project, premium excluded. In the prime location, 5.8% of IRR is not acceptable. 14 is barely acceptable. So on average, the rental per square foot is just $40 or so. So it's not much difference with residential properties rental on the higher end. And so financially speaking, this is a failure. Yes, I understand the administration needs to be conservative, but not that conservative, because it's simply not financially viable. You may as well put the $700 million to the bank with a 5% return. I do think that you will in the end get more or less the same amount. And about the design, well, that actually there is an important element. This is a harbourfront facility from Xiangwan Central to Wan Chai. We need to plan the harbourfront as a whole. So if you're walking along the waterfront, what do you expect to see there? What facilities would you like to see at this location? I don't think focusing on these 3 piers is not good. We have to talk about the 6 or 10 piers. The waterfront as a stretch all the way to the government complex and to the Hong Kong CEC. There should be continuity. Well, perhaps the administration is very responsible. There is lobbying work done, trying to garner our support. But from what I can see from the paper, I'm afraid it's difficult for me to give you my support. This should not be the way forward. We may as well spend a little bit more time for a better plan and design. Well, I don't rule the possibility of accepting proposals from the commercial sector.
If they can meet some of our basic requirements, for example, open space and also local community economy, if all those can be taken care of, then I'm sure the bid won by the business sector will definitely yield a much higher yield than this one. And also it's about our connectivity, as mentioned by some of the members. I think you will have to do it comprehensively, but then I can't see all those features here, and therefore I'm afraid I cannot support this one. All right. It's already 10:30, members. 3 more members would like to speak in the first round, and 1 will be speaking in the second round. And I'll extend the meeting by 17 minutes. Okay, in the second round, only 2 minutes will be allowed. So please be brief, so that we'll be able to deal with this item today. Next, Sit Ho. Sorry, Chairman, can I respond? Sorry. Mr. Ma Fong Kwok already said that he did not require your response. All right, just note his remarks. Ms. Sit Ho. Chairman, all right, the administration has thrown out this issue. That is, some commercial sites would be let out so that outlying island residents can have this very fair subsidy. Well, that's good. But then, well, because in the past, as we are aware, if we just rely on passengers paying the ferry fare, it might not be adequate to support the operation. But then just now the Undersecretary said that as regards the agreement on how the proceeds should be distributed and also how the tendering exercises or exercise would be done, and apparently the piers would only be commissioned in 2017, and you will only be deciding then. But then when you come to us for funding, all right, you'll be responding to our questions and you'll be prepared to make modifications and so on. But then after the funding is approved for such operation agreement, who is going to get the franchise and how much rent would be received and how that would be distributed, whether or not that would be more than enough to subsidize the ferry fare, and that would also turn out to be a transfer of interest, well, no one can tell, and we will have no say then. And therefore, Undersecretary, before you come back again, you will have to let us know the breakdown as to how the proceeds would be distributed. You will have to come up with an estimate, or else by 2017 you come up with something else, and then you would say that all right, you'd already talked to this council, and then we would not be able to respond to that, and some of us might not be here anymore, and we might not be able to follow up on that. I think the most important thing is the tendering exercise, the direction of operation, and also the sharing of proceeds and so on. I think we will have to have a very clear idea as to how that will be done before we can give you our green light, or else if we vote in support of that, we would have thought that the proceeds would be used for subsidizing the ferry fare. But then if it turns out to be a transfer of benefit, then we would be negligent in our duty. And therefore I suggest that the administration should withdraw this paper, and then you will have to go back to the relevant panel to discuss the details. Because strictly speaking, Chairman, I think you have been very relaxed, because today we are only supposed to discuss the engineering design, but then most of the questions are focused on the proceeds and also the future agreement of operation. So it's clear that there are many skepticisms here, and we are not really sure about how it will be like in the future. So I suggest that you withdraw the paper, and then you can go back to the panel for further detailed discussion as to the future operator of the ferry services. Will they also be running the shopping center, or will that be tendered out as a separate contract, and then how the proceeds are going to be shared between the operations? You will have to let us know. And also the most important thing is whether it's to be used by the public. If it's just to be tendered out, and then the highest bid will get it, then it could be turned into something like IFC2, and then only the high-end consumers will be able to use it. Well, back many years ago, there was another facility where many people can have access to, and then we have this waterfront scenic facility. And therefore, in the tendering exercise and also in the terms of operation, we must ensure that there will be some open space for the ordinary public, and that's like the Blake Pier. So I'd suggest that the administration should withdraw this paper, and then it's for the panel to sort out all the details before we give you our approval. Undersecretary, well, for this infrastructure project, I think the most important thing is whether these piers would be government facilities, and therefore the administration will be owning such facilities and the administration will be running such facilities. I think that's the most important point. So I think that's the crux of the matter. Are we going to build some facilities for the private sector? I think on this occasion, the administration will be owning such facilities. As for the detailed operation in the future, well, we will discuss that later, and we'll also be reporting to this council later. Well, whether it's today or in the future, when we come back to report to you, the purpose is very clear. That is, in the future, whatever proceeds that can be obtained from such operations, they will be plowed back to the non-fare receipts of the ferry services. But then, if it's handed over to the ferry operator, and I think it's necessary for us to subsidize the passengers, but then it should not be overdone, or else it will be benefiting the operator. Well, yes, I'm moving on to that, and in our review of the future ferry operations, including the fare structure, that will have an impact, because we also have to look at all the accounts. We will not be allowing the operator to just make huge proceeds on the one hand, and then for the excess, you will not be giving it all back to the operator, right? I think this is the crux of the matter. Please do not just give us a verbal reply. You will have to give us something in writing so that we will have something to rely on in the future. Chairman, I'd just like to make one point. For the entire project, it's a response to the entire community, both the council, the district council, and all the stakeholders. That is, when we cross-subsidize the ferry services, there is one impression that is apparently the administration is taking one step at a time. There is no long-term planning. And precisely, we are putting up a long-term planning, a long-term vision in this case. The reason why we are taking this so urgently, that's because we'd like to deal with the engineering aspect. It doesn't mean that we're not going to deal with the long-term issue. In fact, we have already made a pledge that we will come back to this council to consult you as regards the pros and cons of different modes of operation. The purpose is to ensure that the proceeds that can be yielded can benefit and cross-subsidize the ferry operations. So you can be assured, well, it's out of the question that we're not going to come back to you. So please do view it from this perspective. It's a public works project. Yes, Mr. Michael Tien. Elizabeth Quat. Elizabeth Quat. Thank you, Chairman. I support that the administration should develop such piers in order to subsidize the ferry operations. But then I think the role of the administration is a bit confusing here. I think what we need to clarify today is if the administration continues to own the pier, then of course we might have some views to make too. But then what's the role to be played by the administration? Listening to the administration, I think officials are not experts in running property or real estate and shopping centers. I think the real estate sector is the expert in this aspect, and therefore the design cannot be separated from the operation. You cannot just come up with all the layout plans and then you can hand over the premises to another operator tomorrow. I don't think that would be the best way out. I agree with what other members have said. Christopher Chung, Tung, and Ma Fong Kwok. Apparently the design is not the best and that's also a waste of our precious resources here, because this is really a prime location. It could also be turned into another landmark design, but then the current design is really very disappointing. All right, they might look nice, but then they look identical. There are no specific appeals and characteristics. It's not a must-go spot for the tourists. And also, if you look at the facilities, there are problems here and there. For example, some members have also asked about this on the design of the lifts. How come the lifts are so small? And I can also see that looking at the layout plan, third floor and fourth floor, the area closest to the waterfront for the food and beverage area. Well, are you going to rent it out to the same restaurant? And on the fourth floor, there is no kitchen. And also from the third floor, there is no internal staircase leading up to the fourth floor. So apparently the design leaves something to be desired. So I think given the fact that this is a prime project, it should have been left to the commercial or business sector to operate it, instead of having the government designing everything and then you engage a company to run the operation, or to hand it over to the ferry operator to run it. If that's the case, then the return will not be good, and it's also a waste of the prime premises. So the administration will have to think twice about this, and you will have to come up with a better way out. Thank you. Under Secretary, I'd like to emphasize time and again that with regard to the development of the pier project, I think we have to take care of two aspects. Number one, it's a facility to support the ferry services, and we're trying to include retail and food facilities there. But then we also have to take care of the non-ferry users. When they go to the pier, when they go to the waterfront, they should also be able to enjoy the facility. And if we leave everything to the business sector or a private operator, which will run everything, then when it comes to taking care of the non-commercial space, our past experience has not been entirely good. That's why the investment will be made by the administration, and the ownership would still be in the hands of the administration. But then our experience is that in the future operation, if we can engage a professional contractor to take over everything, and then all the proceeds will have to be plowed back to the ferry operator and ferry operations in subsidizing the fare. I think that's the concept. I think the two things can be done separately, and they can also be separated. As regards the latter, that is how we're able to ensure that there will be a proper mix of the operations in order to yield the best or biggest benefit to benefit the future ferry operations. In a few years' time, we'll be coming back to the transport panel to tell you exactly what the mix is going to be like. But then on the design and on the concept and everything, we have actually gone through the district council, the transport panel, and also the TPB. Everybody accepts that that should be the way out, because if we're not able to commission the works now, under the plan, before 2018, we will have to complete everything. If we are not able to do that, then that would affect the license or the franchise for the ferry operations. And if we cannot complete that in time for the tendering of the ferry services, there might be some difficulties. Yes, Mr. Michael Tian, Chairman, within this council, there are different voices on this item. Some would consider it purely from the business angle. Some would advocate for local community economy. Others would think about a mix of everything. But then we're actually trying to have the best of both worlds. Sometimes it's difficult to achieve that. Well, we have to be pragmatic. We have to look at what this item is all about. Well, for the additional 2 floors, 120,000 square meters, I think the principle is to reduce subsidy. And if we were to reduce subsidy, then definitely this is a purely commercial project, setting aside everything else. By that we mean that whether or not it's a black cat or white cat, it doesn't matter. So long as it can catch mice, it's okay. So transport and commercial operations must be separated. And if you and if you were to hand everything over to the ferry operator, I've done that before. I think there is no logic behind this, because for the transport operator, all right, if they are not able to make a proceed or profit, they'll ask you for subsidy. But then, all right, if the rental income is higher, then of course you subsidize less, and of course they'll just sit back and do nothing. So why would they be bothered? And therefore, precisely this is the problem. That's the way the Hong Kong administration is doing, because this is a transport bureau, and you're not good at business operations, and that's why we have this problem. So I think you should separate the two. For transport operations, all right, for the ferry services, you can have a contract for 3 years every time, but then it has nothing to do with the franchise. But for the ferry operators, you can change them from time to time. But then for this one, it's a purely commercial operation. All right, you talk about the rental income. All right, I'm also in the retail sector, and you talk about 20 to 60 or 70 million dollars. I don't know where these figures have come from.
Basically, there are only two factors in play. If you want, do you want to cater for ferry passengers or non-ferry passengers? Then you consider from which group you can get higher revenue. I think the person who is most unable to tell us the answer is the administration. Neither can the consultant. The only one who can answer us are the shopping mall operators. Say, for example, for 130,000 square meters, where 130,000 square feet for rental income of $30 million at an investment of $700 million. That is not good. If you increase the rental $80 million, that is more or less like it. So how can you make a good decision? You will think about how much rental you can get. Say, for example, call for tender. Ask for expression of interest from retailers. For the first 2 floors, 120,000 square feet, they can participate in a decision of layout. They will do research, and if they think if you give them a longer tenancy, longer lease, say for example 7 years, 10 years, they will be an underwriter. They will pay for this amount of rental and turnover rent, and then they give us the expression of interest. Then we get an idea whether you can, with an investment of $700 million, get a reasonable return. Otherwise, even if you get approval, you will not be able to get through the finance committee. This is a new direction where a project involves commercial elements. Previously, you're given something and then you just do the best you can. And there is an objective, is to reduce the amount of subsidy. And that is not good enough a justification for the project. This is not a livelihood project. The $700 million on the pier is not a necessity. So whether it is viable or not, you look at the return. Call for expression of interest. In a month or two, you give us more information. It will be easier for all of us. Undersecretary. We don't rule out the suggestion of Mr. Tian that in the future there may be a single operator. We don't rule out the possibility. The operator can make suggestions about the layout and the different mix. Return is included. It is worded this way because we've adopted a more conservative approach and juxtapose it with a reasonable scenario for members' reference. We first have to decide whether we will go ahead with the project, and if it is worth the effort and the investment, then the revenue generated will go towards a subsidy to ferry operators. This is necessary for the continuous provision of ferry services. Please give us the information after the meeting, in particular financial estimates and future and the return or operation. Give us the information as far as possible. It is now 10:49. We can at most continue till 11 o'clock. 2 minutes, as I said, in the second round. I said 11 o'clock because members may ask for a division and we'll need time for that. Ms. Chen Yun-han, I appeal to the Undersecretary to withdraw the proposal. I'm concerned about the overall design. The Victoria Harbour is very beautiful. I agree that the administration can use this project to subsidize ferry services. But you are asking me to swallow something that is not palatable. This will be a waste. What's the use of the floor of plants and machines? Yes, you need the hardware, but is it necessary? I do have questions about that. I don't object to the proposal, but this is not palatable to me. So it's better that you withdraw it, otherwise I will be forced to abstain. I agree that this is a good idea, but the design as a whole, why do you just ruin the place? Why do you aim at ruin the Victoria Harbour? We want people from different strata of society to be able to enjoy the view. Every floor there is plant and machine. Why do you have to do that? Why is it that you need plant room on the third floor, apart from the second floor? I'm not saying that this is not a viable design. But you have to listen to the market and people who love the harbour. So, Undersecretary, I don't object to you, but please withdraw it. I agree with Mr. Tian. Use a month to communicate with the sector. Give us a fresh design. So, will you withdraw or not? Let me say something. Ms. Chan's understanding of diagram and design may not be full because there is a lack of information, but we will provide more information about the use of space. Mr. Albert Chan, you may recall that when the piers were constructed, the foundation is designed to cater for a number, more floors. So you can increase the number of floors. You need to keep in mind this piece of information. Are you going to return the harbour to the people? The subsidy was mentioned, but this is not the single objective, although it is important. It's the use. It is the use of the pier, not just 4, 5, and 6. Is to revitalize the Victoria Harbour, to enable the public to enjoy the harbour, to return the harbour to the people. And I think you have to realize these principles, but I don't see how you can do it. Undersecretary, I'll be brief. We have used every elbow room we're given by the TPB. Say, for example, height restrictions and other restrictions. There are things that there is only so much we can do. The pier should not get in the way of the general design of the harbourfront. Last person is Mr. Michael Tian, and then we have to put it to a vote. But I need to ask more information about the $700 million. the increase of 12,000 square, the 120,000 square feet. Is it related to that? Well, are we going to spend spend money on beautifying the pier anyway? So, how much out of the $700 million is related to retail? So is it the case that without the retail increase of retail floor area, there is no need for this project? If we don't have to increase the floor area then in a lot of ways we don't have to spend this amount of money. But with the project, a number of facilities will be improved or increased. Say, for example, the general outlook. But without the retail elements, then the appearance will not be changed. So what project is it? Is retail plus improvement of appearance? Well, that is also taken into account because currently non-passengers are not allowed to use the upper floors. We have to take into account ferry passengers and members of the public to enable them to better use the waterfront. What I hear is that the $700 million is entirely something to do with the retails. Then this is purely a commercial project. That is, without increasing retail floor areas, there is no need for the project. And they will need to get some expression of interest. Otherwise, there will be problems with the Finance Committee. Anyone else? Chairman, the Democratic Party supports the subsidy and we agree that is the right direction. But there are lots of questions and problems. If the administration withdraw the proposal to discuss more with us, it would be better. We understand that there are restrictions, but there are too many issues raised today, and it's not as urgent as that. You can just withdraw it, iron out all the issues. It's apparent that you are poorly prepared. And the Secretary, a number of concerns were expressed, and they are something to do with future operations, how to maximize revenue in the future. Well, Mr. Ng Lang Sing and Mr. Ma Fong Kwok talk about the concept. They have a different idea about the decision to invest. Other than that, I think the main concern is about future operation. We have sufficient time. We believe that we have sufficient time, and we will come back to the LegCo to seek your views as to how to do it better. And we will provide the information before we go to the FC. I think you have given us sufficient supplement. If there are no other questions, I'll put this to a vote. Those in favor, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. Those abstain, please raise their hands. And the Secretary, you see the result. So, what is it? I can't see. I'm speaking. Please don't interrupt. But I can't see it. This proposal is not endorsed. Meeting adjourned.